Fourth Amendment states the following: the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall give issue but upon probable cause, supported by the oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. The goal set for this amendment is to protect the people's right to privacy and freedom from unwanted intrusions by the government. Although this amendment cannot protect everybody from searches and seizures that are not condoned under the law.
There's a lot of controversy over the regulations that the government may have and whether they need a warrant or not to be able to search.
Do you need a warrant at this point for the police? And you say the government, but it's really the police departments, right? It's a police department branch of the government.
It's the police department branch of the government, but it would apply to the government more broadly. And most courts have said that no warrant is required, but a few courts have said that a warrant is required. So there's a division among the judges as to exactly how to go about applying the Fourth Amendment to this new set of facts.
Stop and frisk is a big issue amongst New Yorkers. The New York Police Department stops people who look suspicious and are up to no good. People believe this is an action and subject to racial profiling.
The stop and frisk has been implemented, especially from a lot of localities, New York City under Mayor Giuliani, in the 90s especially. One thing that's been kind of not taken into account is to when and how do we suspend the Fourth Amendment? There's legal search and seizure. Does stop and frisk fall under that, which has been a controversy? Obviously, things in there was with profiling of individuals, and looking at the current, especially prison situation we have, is that are we profiling certain people, especially the people that look shady, and how is that process going through? And I guess the main thing is law enforcement trained properly and has a proper amount of resources to be able to make those determinations on when do we go ahead and do more proactive law enforcement versus more reactive and waiting for things to happen.
Stop and frisk not only plays a part in the safety of the people's rights, but an issue amongst the Black Lives Matter movement and racial profiling.
Well, if you want to curtail it with the 13th Amendment, which abolishes slavery, but at the same point abolishes slavery except for people that have committed crimes. Mm-hmm. So that comes into play, is that are we going ahead and if you look at it, the criminalization especially of African Americans after the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment were passed, some people see it as a subversive way or a different way of going ahead and continuing, I don't say continuing slavery, but continuing a situation where white authority still is in power. So I mean, with the Black Lives Matter movement, I think it is one of the major issues there. And again, when you talk about people getting stopped in their cars, then we have a whole different set of circumstances.
A big problem with stop and frisk is that it's all based off judgment, and a lot of people can interpret that in a lot of different ways.
What is probable cause? That's the problem people are having with the Fourth Amendment, with unlawful stops, unlawful searches. Well, unlawful would be based on those two things, whether the search was unreasonable or that they had probable cause. Mm-hmm. It greatly depends on the police officer. It greatly depends on the state and how they interpret that law.
Cibran versus New York. Nelson Cibran was a suspected drug dealer. In 1967, he was followed by an undercover cop. When an undercover cop approached Nelson, he said, "You know what I'm after." Nelson then pulled out several envelopes filled with heroin. Later on in Cibran's trial, trying to suppress the heroin evidence, he said the stop and frisk was unconstitutional.
In an 8-1 decision, the court began by noting that although states may grant police officers great latitude in making arrests, all searches and seizures are subject to constitutional limitations. In Cibran's case, the court noted that Officer Martinez never actually heard of any conversations between Cibran and the narcotic addicts. As such, the inference that Cibran engaged in narcotic trafficking merely because he spoke with drug addicts did not constitute probable cause for a warrantless search.
Terry versus Ohio. Two men in plain clothes were walking by a building.
A police officer believed that they may be casing the building for a robbery they were planning. The officer then stopped and frisked both men, finding concealed weapons. One man named Terry was sentenced to 3 years in jail. The case was then taken to court. Terry claimed unlawful search and seizure. The court then came to an agreement that the officer had reasonable suspicion and did not violate the Fourth Amendment.
In conclusion, stop and frisk is a huge problem in New York and a ton of big cities around the United States. In 2011, 685,724 people were stop and frisked in New York alone. And out of those 685,000 people, 350,743 people were black, and that's about 53%. In conclusion, stop and frisk is a huge problem against the Fourth Amendment. In my opinion, I feel that stop and frisk is unconstitutional because it is very inconsistent and is all based off interpretation. I believe that the system is very much flawed and needs a lot of work, and it needs to protect our rights that the Fourth Amendment promises us in the U.S. Constitution. What is clear about the Fourth Amendment now is that advancing technology and the threats that face society add up to brew in which the Fourth Amendment will continue to play a central role in.